So DevOps. Now, people who are familiar with cloud platform development are going to growl foul and say that, this is not really DevOps. Okay, what is really DevOps? DevOps is this whole like development operations concept in software development where you have development environment where you actually do the programming to create software. And then once that's done, you actually move it over into operations, right? You deploy it so that folks can actually use it. Okay, well, nice, but I'm ripping that off as my own metaphor for how you need to engage with our version of ops, which is really the operational end users, right? Those folks who, again, you envision as the people who will actually use your technology. So in this metaphor, you are the developers, right? You are the folks who are actually building the hardware and software that those operators need to use. The nice thing is that the the process, right, the sort of back and forth, the flow that goes between development and ops in the software development realm very closely mirrors how it needs to work in the technology development realm, right? So you are the developers here. You need to plan, build, demonstrate, deploy your capabilities to those operators. And there's a lot of different ways that this can happen, right? Whether you have contracts or not, you can go to prototyping events, demonstration events, prototype exercises, where you can actually put your technology kind of in the hands of operational end users and get them to play with it, see if they like it, and give you feedback, right? And that is absolutely critical because you need to deeply understand how that technology is actually going to be operationally implemented. I've seen 1,000 times developers have a great sketch on a whiteboard of how they envision a technology being used, right? They have an idea of the problem they're being able to solve and what problem they're applying to. And then when push comes to shove, they actually put that in the hands of the operator. It gets used in wildly different ways, right? And creating this recursive process where you develop something, you show it to the end users, you get their actual candid, unvarnished feedback on how it would actually be used, allows you to then integrate that feedback and build a better product that is more tailored, more responsive to the actual operational need. Now, getting operational feedback is not easy, right? You can't go to every single operational exercise. If you're not on contract, you might not actually have a contractual connection to an operator. And even frankly, my experience being on like SBIR contracts, the program manager who has your SBIR may not actually have any connection with the operational force, right? They might be at the program level and have a concept they want to test out, something they want to experiment on, or they might be responding to an articulated need or requirement, something that someone wrote down and gave to them, but they might not be operators. And so they might not actually know the sort of tangible aspects of that operational mission. So getting connection to operators is super important, and it is absolutely invaluable because at the end of the day, right, if we go down the road, you're trying to get to deployment, you're trying to get to a program of record. Eventually, your thing is going to have to get tested and evaluated by operational end users. It's going to get feedback from the operational force, the folks who actually write the requirements that create the need and create the budget lines, create the funding, create the programs for your technology. So the earlier you can get that feedback loop established with those operators, the better. Because fundamentally, the faster you can turn that loop, the faster you can get something that will actually get adopted, right? So getting connection to that ops is super important. You can sometimes shortcut that if you have a recently separated operator. So if you have somebody on your team, maybe you use the skill bridge program and you brought in somebody who's coming off of active duty and they're coming straight out of the force from the operational community that you are designing your technology for. They can give you that direct feedback in real time. They can give you that insight. And frankly, they can probably reach back into that operational force using their personal network. It's a great hack for this problem set. But when I say recently separated, I mean within the last 12 to 24 months. Once you've been out of the force, once you've been off the job for more than 2 years, your experience really is kind of aged out, right? You've more or less become obsolete. Your experience, and I've experienced this myself, right? Your touch with the game has become aged, and so you need that fresh, recent experience with the aspects of that mission. If you can use the skill bridge program, it's great, right? Folks coming off of active duty and can work. I think it's like 3 to 6 months on the military's dime, and also for you, right? So the government pays for them to work in the civilian sector. It's a great way to get that operational feedback. The other thing I'll say is, if you've met one operator in one mission set, you've met one operator in one mission set. As we said earlier, you want to apply your technology to as many relevant operators as possible. So if you engage with one operational community, right, you engage with jet pilots in the Navy, that does not necessarily translate to jet fighters in the Air Force, right? You need to engage in those separate operational communities. You talk to infantry, Army infantry people in one group, and you talk to Army infantry people in another group, they're probably going to be pretty similar. But if you talk to Army infantry folks and Marine Corps infantry folks, they're different, right? So don't assume that if you have one connection to one operational group with one mission set, that a similar operator group is going to be the same. You need to, again, get as much diversity of input as possible. You might need to center in on that large sort of initial ideal customer persona, to use the sort of commercial technology development terms. But you need to identify who those operators are. You need to try to get connected with them, and you need to establish, if you can, that consistent flow of feedback about your technology, and really actually take their feedback to heart.